one day I remember in a session she handed me a picture book called All Cats Have Asperger's. On each page is a picture of a cat doing something cat-like, and on the corresponding page is a description of an autistic trait. But I got to the end of the book and I was sobbing. I was sitting there thinking, well, either I'm autistic or I'm a cat. And it turns out, believe it or not a cat.
Not a cat. There's no single way to be autistic, especially if you're a woman or gender diverse person. And as the saying goes, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. I'm Yumi Stynes and we're here to talk to Grace Tame. Thanks for joining us today, Grace.
Yay!
Yay! Yay, you. You've been called all sorts of things throughout your life: sensitive, divisive, non-compliant, and back in February you were called difficult by none other than our Prime Minister.
I thought you were just listing things that my dad says about me.
Can we talk about something that you do identify with, being autistic? What were the earliest signs that made you think, oh yeah, of course that's autism?
I was always described as weird and quirky. I survived socially in many ways because I had a sense of humour, and was somewhat of a class clown. I would have these sort of very intense special interests, one of which was the comedy of Robin Williams, and I would be able to, because I have this ability to retain large swathes of information that aren't necessarily useful, and I have to be careful that I don't sort of push out, like family birthdays and things like that. But I would be able to quote, just like rattle off whole monologues, like the opening monologue from Good Morning Vietnam that Robin Williams famously delivered.
Yeah.
I can still rattle that off if pressed.
Right. I can only remember Good Morning Vietnam.
Hey, this is not a test. This is rock and roll. Time to rock it from the Delta to the DMC. Is that me or does that sound like an Elvis Presley movie? Viva Da Nang. Oh, Viva Da Nang. Da Nang me, Da Nang me. Oh, I can keep going.
Wow.
I'm not going to. It goes for like 2 minutes.
Yeah, amazing.
We don't need that.
But I was also curious about like being mistaken for she's so dramatic or she's so sensitive or spoiled or needy.
I mean, I certainly was, I think, called dramatic, but not necessarily by people who were particularly supportive. I do remember as a child, though, when I was 3 or 4, aside from being regularly told that I needed to make eye contact with people, I was told that I needed to be a more active participant in conversation because, believe it or not, there's a side of me that is quite shy and introverted, and that was sort of pushed out of me. And then fast forward to my early teens when I shifted from a co-ed public primary school where most of my friends were boys. I was really receptive to the structure and the routine. And then I entered a completely different environment, an all-girls school that was private, that had different expectations and very different social dynamics. And that change, that dramatic change, really dysregulated me. I didn't respond well to it at all. And something we now know more about, there's an acronym for it, ARFID, that sort of describes the sensitivity that a lot of autistic people have to certain foods and certain textures that then perhaps limits their diet. And that's something that I really struggled with, but was misdiagnosed as being anorexic at age 14. And it was in treatment for anorexia that my mum raised with the medical team the idea that I was actually autistic and that was something that needed to be addressed. And she was dismissed by the doctors. And it wasn't until I was 19 years old that I received a clinical autism diagnosis.
Why do you think you were missed as a kid?
It's hard to say. I think because I was so sensitive to the needs of others, especially given the fact that I had to be sensitive to sort of constantly changing needs as I was moving between 2 different households that had different needs. And so I learned that the safest way to survive was to make sure that I was pleasing the others in the environment that I was in and adhering to that environment as opposed to asserting my own needs, which really it took a long time for me to identify because I had suppressed them so much. There are also lots of confounding factors. You know, there are other sources of trauma. I mean, autism is often described as being a trauma in of itself or something that can become traumatic because of prolonged unmet needs and how they then manifest in the form of physical ailments or, you know, poor mental health or
Grace, that's really freaking heartbreaking.
Yeah, I would say so. And I'm lucky in many ways in that I've always been surrounded by close, supportive, accepting, tolerant family and friends. And in fact, my best friend to this day, his name is Dom. We met when we were 7 years old in primary school. He's also autistic, and our friendship has been, pardon the pun, somewhat of a saving grace.
How did your parents respond to your autism diagnosis?
My mother was very supportive and has always been a really staunch advocate for me and my needs. And she had done a lot of research. She had books that she provided me with that are sort of my Bibles to this day that have really helped me to sort of not only understand myself but understand how I can best interact with a predominantly neurotypical world.
Yep.
My dad was at first quite resistant, which is quite funny considering that in the last sort of, third of his 35-year public high school teaching career, he worked solely with higher needs kids, including kids who had autism. And if you go to my dad's house, it's a living, breathing autism diagnosis.
Is it really? What does that look like?
It looks like everything organised according to the colour spectrum.
Wow.
And a prohibitive standard of hygiene and cleanliness.
Like that, yep.
He is a stickler for routine.
So your dad's autistic?
The sky's blue. Yumi? I don't know what else to tell you. So he was quite resistant, and I think it's because, first of all, I was very good at masking. Second of all, Dad's exposure to autism was really quite limited to children with higher assistive needs, and that doesn't encompass the entire spectrum of autism.
Tell me about how your mum's approach to parenting and about her ongoing support and how that impacts who you are today.
I literally wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for my mum. She, to this day, is not in stature but certainly in spirit my biggest advocate. And thinking about what she has sacrificed in order to protect me and give me the best life and to make sure that I felt loved, I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky.
What did she sacrifice?
Oh, just her own time and needs, and I know that's part of parenthood. I haven't had the privilege yet of raising a child. I hope to one day. And if I could be even a sliver of the force of love and light that my mum is, I'd be very happy.
She's unreal.
She's unreal.
So lots of women talk about masking as a survival tool, much more than men or boys. What is masking or camouflaging to you?
The literal autist in me just wants to describe camo clothing in a military context.
Okay.
That is not what it is. That is camouflaging. Masking, the concept, the abstract concept of masking is hiding, and often not consciously, hiding or suppressing your needs in order to get through a certain social situation or survive an environment without being punished or shamed.
Is it a voice in your head saying, okay, Grace, we're walking into this party, act normal, act normal, act normal? Is that what Is that what it is?
I've never had a voice in my head saying act normal, act normal, act normal, because I wouldn't know what normal is. I just sort of, there's like a range. I, like many autistic people, would often have sort of scripts in anticipation of a particular social situation and what I might anticipate was going to happen in that social situation. Again, it's not always conscious for autistic people, but it comes from sort of like a conditioned, like deeply ingrained, conditioned awareness of what is socially acceptable, which I think really challenges this common misconception that we hear about autism and autistic people, that we're not empathetic or sensitive to the needs of others. I would argue that in many cases, autistic people are oversensitive, hypersensitive to the needs and feelings and experiences of others, because we want to make sure that they're okay. And we want to make sure that we're not doing anything that will upset or disturb them. What covered up or masked my autistic experiences of sensory overload and, struggling with understanding subtext in social situations and being really adverse to change was that I overextended myself and performed at a very high level academically, athletically, and sort of in any arena that I could. And so people mistook that as talent and skill. And in some ways, yes, that there's truth to that. But it was, behind closed doors, I was pushing myself, and training myself to be able to achieve that high sort of, acutely high level of, quote unquote success.
Yeah, and those metrics matter in lots of ways. You've also been diagnosed with ADHD along with autism. The double diagnosis has only been possible since 2013 and it's called ADHD. How does the double diagnosis play out for you?
It's hard to say because there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
It's interesting again because I think a lot of those symptoms were masked by things that I unknowingly did that can help manage the symptoms. So I'm a keen runner and cyclist. And when I say keen, I mean extreme. So, I'm going out and I'm running, like sometimes 40 Ks at a time. The races that I train to do a few times a year are 60 Ks and over. Just this morning I cycled 60 Ks and for me that's like a sort of a short day on the bike. And that really helps regulate your nervous system, it helps regulate your emotions, and it helps take the edge off what can otherwise be sort of pendulous swings of emotion.
Right.
Or
so it's
fatigue.
like a sort of form of medication.
It's a form of medication. So I was always sort of doing a lot of activity that was helping to align or sort of sort of like streamline otherwise very chaotic energy. I am an Energizer bunny. I am particularly hard to tire out, even more so if I don't have sort of outlets that I'm regularly engaged in that are healthy.
Yeah. So that was one of your main coping strategies unknowingly.
My brain and my body go a million miles an hour.
Right.
Like I'm a turbo chicken. A cat, and it's simultaneously a cat and a turbo chicken. I don't know what that would look
and
like.
And an Energizer bunny.
Energizer bunny, turbo chicken, and a cat.
It sounds exhausting.
Yeah.
Is it exhausting or is it?
Yes, it can be.
Yeah,
it can be. I'm really prone to burnout, and because I internalize my needs sort of as out of habit, I withstand a lot. And then I get to this sort of like very sudden, seemingly inexplicable breaking point when really it's been a cumulative impact of things that have been happening over time.
And then what happens?
I just fall in a heap, sometimes literally, but often it'll be me just sitting and staring into space and essentially catatonic.
For how long?
A couple of days. And it's interesting, a lot of those sort of like basic life skills and self-care skills like brushing your teeth, having a shower, those fall by the wayside before other things that other people might consider extreme or daunting.
So we've talked about burnout. What does recovery look like from burnout?
recovery might just look like not doing anything that is cognitively difficult, or just sort of like quote unquote vegging out and watching TV. Sometimes I just like putting on the L Word or something.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Like, lesbians.
And does taking care of yourself mean understanding what is going to dysregulate you and what is going to be one of those accumulative effects like the lights and the buzzing fridge? Is that part of it? Is kind of arranging your environment to be?
Yes. I like to tidy things because I personally feel as though physical clutter translates to internal clutter. So I like my external world to kind of mimic my interior world. And then safe foods that I like eat routinely.
We're talking about coping behaviours and burnout. What were some of your unhealthy coping mechanisms when you were younger?
You may need the legal team for this. They were bleep and bleep and bleep. No. Gosh. I used alcohol as a social lubricant. And certainly after I turned 18, it was any excuse for me to be out drinking because it had an effect of disinhibiting me and sort of relieving, at least temporarily, the anxiety. But then, of course, alcohol is a depressant, so there was always a sort of a cost to that. And, later when I moved to the United States where illicit drugs are more accessible, and certainly there were more predators that I encountered that would lure me in with more hard drugs, and just sort of spending a lot of time in very unsafe environments that I'm lucky to have survived in hindsight.
Research shows that autistic girls and women face significantly higher rates of sexual violence. You've spoken about how autistic girls can be more vulnerable to grooming. In your experience, what do you feel made you more at risk?
As an autistic person who spent a lifetime suppressing needs in order to survive and trying so desperately to make sure everyone around me was okay, I suspect that my default to people pleasing played a large part in being particularly susceptible to grooming and manipulation.
And I want to ask about that too, because a lot of what you've said in the past is about having empathy even for people who are hurting you.
Yeah.
It's wild, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I have a tendency to identify or try to find, even in its absence, the humanity in everyone. So I think, that heightened empathy and also the sort of the want to make sure that others are okay made me particularly tolerant of very bad behaviour and, in fact, abusive behaviour.
Do you think you're immune now?
No. No, and it's hard because on the one hand, I've developed a thick skin, but also I think we need to move through life with a thin skin at the same time, with a gentle skin to be able to feel.
So, Grace, this is a really important question. What do you think autistic girls and women need to be taught early on to help protect them? Or is that putting too much on the victim, potential victim?
I think it is important to equip autistic girls and women with certain safety skills. However, I think it is equally important, if not more important, to educate the non-autistic population on how best to support autistic people. I think the framing should be less around trying to mould autistic women and girls. It should be less on that and more on the conversation to include better representation of autistic experiences. I mean, I always think back on my childhood and I just sort of wish someone had been a bit more blunt with me about the potential of other people to cause harm. I missed that memo.
Yeah, right.
And also that it is okay for you to assert your boundaries. And if someone has a problem with that, that actually doesn't reflect on you, that reflects on them. I wish I'd been taught those sorts of things earlier, that I don't have to just, roll over for everyone.
Research shows that autistic women are 2 to 3 times more likely to be queer than non-autistic women?
If the shoe fits.
How has being autistic and queer shaped you?
Gosh, I mean, I sort of wasn't very conscious of any of that. It was sort of always quite obvious, I think. So when I was about 7 or 8, I refused to wear pink and I refused to wear girls' clothes. And I made my mum, shop exclusively in the boys' section at department stores. But, it was not particularly defined though either. Like I still have very feminine qualities that I really like. Like, I've got a metre of hair, which is very useful for shoplifting trinkets. And like rehabilitating birds and just my coming. I did write about it in my book, and that seems to have been glossed over, maybe because there was just so much in there. But yeah, I mean, I spoke about having relationships with women when I felt more comfortable in the United States, certainly when I was exploring my identity more without the sort of preconceived notions that were projected onto me by others. But yeah, it's taken me up until the last couple of years for me to finally just go, poosh.
What's coming off there? Stripper pants?
I don't know. Yeah, chaps. Assless chaps.
Your Velcro tear off.
I'm also a gay man, apparently.
Cover it all, Grace. Yeah, well, you just said, is this my coming out? Because I do feel like I
just never thought, because for me, because I have no judgment of other people's sexuality, orientation, identity, whatever their skin colour, whatever their like background, poor, rich, whatever. So I'm judging the person on their actions and their intentions. The same with autism though as well.
Yeah.
It's only been in sort of like recent years that I've had a public platform and people have asked me, just like specifically about being autistic and the autistic experience, that it's really occurred to me to sort of categorise sorts of things.
Tell me about how you found equality in intimacy with women and what that's allowed you to explore.
Oof. Is this the PG or R-rated version? Because the sort of the standard was set in an extreme, violent, sadistic way. I lost my virginity via rape on a floor as a 15-year-old to a 58-year-old man who literally laughed. Like, that is very grim. And I learned as a survival mechanism to go along to get along. And my default was to be submissive and to not even know what my sexual sort of desires were. I was just sort of in a position of responding and, making sure that the other person was enjoying themselves. And when I started exploring having intimate relationships with women, it just felt completely different and organic. It was that I didn't feel like I needed to be submissive necessarily. I felt like it was more of an exchange of like a dance, as opposed to sort of just being subjected to something.
Yeah, on the receiving end of something.
Yeah, receiving.
Yeah, that sounds like a profound shift.
It was a profound shift.
You've explained your autistic experience as high definition. Can you tell me what you mean by that?
I sort of experience like emotion and senses at the most acute, sort of extreme, high definition level. Sounds I'm hearing at full volume, colours I'm seeing at their most vivid. Sort of like, senses are like in overdrive.
I really want to ask if it's like being on acid, but I don't want either of us to get cancelled.
I mean, at this point in my career,
yes,
that's not what I'm worried about.
Grace, what do you consider your autistic strengths?
My ability to retain information is quite useful. And just my drive and sense of injustice that is sometimes debilitating and gets me into a lot of trouble because my sense of injustice is so strong that it overpowers my consciousness of needing to conform.
Yeah.
So I will often take massive risks and pay massive costs.
Yeah. Grace, if today's understanding of autism in girls had existed when you were a kid, in what ways do you think your life would have looked different?
Well, I would have been diagnosed much earlier, and I think there would have been more attention put on my specific needs. And I would say hands down I wouldn't have been sexually abused by a child sex offender.
That's pretty rough.
Yeah, and look, that's nobody's fault except his. I think that my parents did the best they could with what they had to try to protect me. I think that I would have been less susceptible to burning out and probably wouldn't have overextended myself as much to fit in.
What do you want younger autistic women or gender diverse people to know, especially those who feel misunderstood or misdiagnosed?
I want them to know that they are not alone and that as hard as life can be as an autistic woman or an autistic girl, it can be beautiful and joyful and wholesome and regenerative. Autism is so many things. It is not a stereotype and it is not a look.
It's not
No.
a look.
No.
Okay.
I, like many autistic people, have been told that I do not look autistic.
Right.
And I wasn't aware that it was an image.
So good. Thank you. I'm Yumi Stynes and Grace Tame. Thank you for being Autistic AF.
Hi, Grace Tame here. I'm taking over Ladies We Need to Talk for a series on women and autism. Follow the series by searching Ladies We Need to Talk on ABC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.